I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation is the OnlyFans murder trial. Courtney Clenney was a naked model making tons of cash. She lived with her boyfriend in a relationship that some have compared to Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. Very toxic. But the big difference in this relationship is that it resulted in murder charges. Here's the story. 26-year-old Courtney Clenney is a social media star. She has over 2 million followers and has built a very successful career. While she is very visible on Instagram, she also has an OnlyFans page. This is a place where her fans can pay her through the app for access to videos and images you will never see on Instagram. She was so successful, she was living in a plush apartment in Miami, living with her boyfriend, Christian Obumseli, until April 3rd of 2022, when Courtney used a knife to kill him. She is claiming self-defense, but prosecutors say she was the aggressor the day she killed Christian, just like she was the aggressor in this elevator 2 months before the killing. It was a complicated relationship and a messy scene inside the apartment where Christian was fatally wounded. To me, this story is such a tragedy because you have two young people, good looking, with bright futures, and they're actually doing very well as they were living in their 20s. And for it to all end this way, to me, is an incredible waste, and a waste of an opportunity. So there are questions about exactly what happened that day in the apartment and exactly how the knife ended up in Christian Obumseli. But I want you to take a listen to the state attorney here talking about the fatal wound.
The chief medical examiner of Miami-Dade County determined that Christian's cause of death was a stab to the chest. Christian was stabbed as the knife punctured the subclavian artery in his right chest. If you look over here for just a second to either one of these screens, you will get a good idea of how large that subclavian artery is within the human heart. The chief medical examiner further determined that the knife entered Christian's chest in a downward angle to the depth of 3 inches. In other words, the medical examiner has indicated that the fatal knife wound which entered Christian's chest was the result of a forceful downward thrust penetrating to the depth of over just 3 inches into that artery you just saw. You'll see there on those screens on either side how deep that 3 inches is. Doesn't sound like a lot, but it was certainly enough to kill him.
So we've covered, unfortunately, other cases involving stabbings, and a lot of times there are multiple stab wounds, cases where there are 30, 40, 70 stab wounds. Here there's just one, and that brings us to the first question in our investigation. How did one knife wound kill Christian? And I think there's a couple different aspects to this. You know, what is happening internally to cause his death as a result of this wound, but also what does it take to cause that wound? So joining me to help us figure all this out, entertainment reporter who's followed this case and host of Kinsey's LA Diaries on Talk TV, Kinsey Schofield is with us, and forensic death investigator, host of the very popular Body Bags podcast, Joseph Scott Morgan is here. Joseph, I'll start with you, and the first part of the question to me really is what's happening to Christian. And the way it was described, right subclavian artery, downward angle, a depth of 3 inches. I've also heard 8 centimeters in that range. So what's happening to Christian Obumseli as that knife is entering him that way?
Thanks for having me tonight with you, Vin. Yeah, when you think about the diagram that the prosecutor put up on the board there, she had showed this image of the heart, this drawing, if you will, this illustration. And coming off of the top of the heart is what's referred to as the aorta. It's the largest vessel in the body, tremendous amount of pressure. It supplies roughly It's the main thoroughfare for all oxygenated blood that runs through the body. And the subclave literally branches off of the top of the aortic arch, and it turns in to the brachiocephalic artery, and that runs down the arm. So this vessel is actually supplying Mr. Obumseli's right arm with blood supply. And the fact that he collapsed and went down so quickly is not surprising. As I'd mentioned, there's a tremendous amount of pressure. You know how we've covered cases in the past, Vin, where we talk about arterial blood spray, and it's very dynamic. It's almost a histamine-like deposition that comes out. That's what she clipped here. And one more important thing about this is, and right she was when she pointed out, and this is per Dr. Hutchins, the chief medical examiner for Miami-Dade, this is at a downward angle. Many people have talked about, or at least she has put forth this story that this was a thrown event. This is not a thrown knife. This is consistent with driving a knife downward. If everybody at home will find your collarbone, that's actually your clavicle. So they're talking about subclavicular. It enters inferior to this large round bone that is your collarbone. That's where they're talking about. And so you've got a network of vessels that are running through there. And you're right, Vin, it only takes one. It only takes one, and she happened anatomically to target, maybe unbeknownst to her, to that very specific vessel, and it was a lethal blow.
Now, as Joseph mentioned, Courtney Clenney did tell a story about what happened in her interview. Let's take a listen.
Oh, I grabbed my knife and I said, "Don't come anywhere closer to me." I had absolutely no intention of using it. I'm on the phone with my mom, and he's coming at me like he's gonna grab either the phone or like the knife or something. And so I was just like, I was like, don't come any closer. It's coming at me, and I threw it.
And at the end there, she said, he's coming at me, and I threw it. This is an absolute chaotic situation, Kinsey, this day. It seems like she's on the phone, she's got the knife, they're screaming, they're yelling. There's a lot of like really bad things happening all at once, and she seems like she's a little bit out of it herself.
Absolutely. But, you know, I think it's interesting when we ask why did it take just one stab wound to kill him? I mean, Christian was flirting with disaster because in the grand scheme of things, this wasn't his first stab wound by his girlfriend. It wasn't their first physical fight or his first physical injury. You know, every day he stayed with her. It was a game of Russian roulette. And on April 3rd, 2022, he lost that game. So this was a very toxic relationship. It does sound like the scene was incredibly chaotic. And who instinctually grabs a knife when they're in an argument? I know that I'm not one of those people.
Let's take a look at this, Joseph, because the medical examiner was asked the question about whether someone could throw the knife, and here's what the medical examiner said.
Based on the same observations, does it support that at least 8 to 12 pounds of force would have been used in order to create that damage?
In general, yes.
Now, based on the information you received that the defendant was alleged to have thrown this knife, you know, do your observations support that?
I'm not an expert in knife throwing. If the person who supposedly did this is an expert knife thrower, and the knife is the type of knife that you can throw, I guess that could have happened.
Speaking of knife throwers, the defense did provide this video of this, and it appears to be a knife thrower throwing a knife at a pig. Joseph, your thoughts about whether this knife could have been thrown like this gentleman is throwing it at this pig?
No. In my opinion, plainly, I'll say that to anybody. I don't care who they are. And even if it was, it would be greater than a 1 in a million shot. And here's the other thing. If you take a look, there's a great image that Court TV's producers put up of the height comparison between she and he. And when you take a look at that, we're talking about a downward angle, right? So if they're in a static position and you're throwing on a flat plane, you're not going to get a downward presentation of this knife sticking into his body. And here's the other thing. 3 inches doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're talking about the surface tension of skin, the elasticity of the skin, also you're going through musculature that's just beneath the skin, not to mention the subcu fat. Also, you're having to go between 2 ribs, and literally your ribs start out really high in your body. So you're having to go through what's referred to as intercostal muscle at that point in time to get down to that level. It's a tremendous amount of force. And so what the ME was testifying there is spot on relative to how much force it would take. Remember, with any kind of thrown object in a case like this, where you're talking about energy that's having to be exerted, you have to have a certain amount of velocity that is going to deliver that energy on point, no pun intended, and then drive that object home. And I cannot imagine she would be able to generate that kind of force behind this knife to make it penetrate 3 inches into this guy's chest. One more thing, and I'll be quiet. This guy's well muscled too. He's very dense up top, Ben. Just take a look at the images of him. This guy works out.
Yeah. I mean, she started as a fitness type model as well, going in competitions before she sort of changed directions here. But Joseph Scott Morgan, thank you so much. Great to have you aboard. Kinsey's going to stay with us. Coming up next, how successful was Courtney Clenney?
So you have property in your apartment?
In my apartment, yes. I paid $10,000 a month for it. He doesn't pay zero for it.
Grieving widow or mastermind behind a murder.
Monica Cimentelli is accused of plotting to kill her husband.
Famed celebrity hairstylist Fabio Cimentelli.
Prosecutors say she and her lover killed Fabio to collect a big life insurance policy.
The defense may say she's a bad woman, but she wouldn't be involved in a murder.
It's a whodunit Hollywood story, but will there be a twist that no one sees?
The Celebrity Stylist Murder Trial. Weekday mornings, only on Court TV.
Belong to something greater.
He has belongings in there. He has belongings in there with you, right? He has property? Okay. So you have property in your apartment?
In my apartment, yes. I paid $10,000 a month for it. He doesn't pay zero for it. Yes. So I will have, I really, like, I will happily, I don't care what happens. I don't want to
Courtney, let me ask you this.
Courtney Clenney paying $10,000 a month in rent down in Miami, and it's in one of the most exclusive parts of Miami. And she's young, she's in her 20s. Brings us to the next question in our investigation. Just how successful was Courtney Clenney? Whether it's money, fame, the combination of both. Still with us, entertainment reporter Kinsey Schofield, and joining us, psychotherapist, CEO of Life Counseling Solutions, Dr. Janie Lacey. Kinsey, let's start here. She's working in the world of Instagram and OnlyFans, right? Give us a description of what she's doing and how she's generating income in those worlds.
Well, when it comes to Instagram, that could be potential incentives or bonuses from social media platforms and brands, or becoming a brand ambassador. Sometimes Instagram will pay you to post. When it comes to OnlyFans, I think we know the drill. That is, people subscribe to your content, and it's typically X-rated content, and we know that that certainly was the case with Courtney. At one point, you know, the state said that she was making $3 million in less than 3 years, thanks to her OnlyFans content. And that's a significant amount of subscribers. We know she had 2 million Instagram followers. I'm uncertain of the amount of OnlyFans subscribers it would take to generate that much income, but that is the definition of success in that arena.
And those subscribers paying their little monthly fees, and she's posting. Let me ask you, Dr. Janie Lacey, about the personality, right? And the way I kind of looked at her social media presence, it seems she started as like a fitness model, right? And she'd lift weights. Come on my journey. I'm going to do my curls, and then I'm getting prepared for my first show. And then she's on Instagram, and it's not so much about the fitness. Now she's wearing bathing suits and doing a little traveling. And then on OnlyFans, it's like no holds barred. What type of what does that tell us about her personality and going from one place and ending up in a much different place?
Well, what that would tell me about her personality is that she was following where she was getting most validated. So she started out as the fitness and had people coming along the journey, and then she found a niche where she was getting more validation, more success by the sense of followers, by the sense of people subscribing to her. So when I look at that type of personality, there's a natural tendency to have higher narcissistic traits, because you're getting all of these types of things, but yet we also know that her relationships were not necessarily well intact to be successful, but yet she had success when it came to financial success. She probably had success when it came to her career success, but in other areas, not so much, or she wouldn't be in jail right now.
I want you to take a listen to her father, who was in court, talking about the money in this case and the money that his daughter was making. The numbers are big. Take a listen.
After April 3rd, Courtney was a mess. I didn't really trust her to handle her finances. One important thing was that her debit card for one of her accounts was not found, and we didn't know who had it or had access to her accounts. So we felt like the prudent thing to do would be to transfer the money into one of our kind of dormant accounts and then safeguard it that way, and then as she needed it, we could use it on her benefit. Well, the first wires were on April 12th of this year. There was one wire for $121,000, one wire for $1,013,000, and then subsequently in May, there was a $50,000 wire as well.
So, Kenzie, these numbers that you gave us are right on. I mean, in court, he's saying I'm wiring, more than $1 million, $1.2 million is being wired to his account at this point. But when you look at this world of OnlyFans, some people say, oh, but it's kind of standard out in LA. There's a lot of young women in this business working for themselves, extremely successful. So is it? I mean, it's very accepted, isn't it? In society to a certain extent?
Well, as a Southern Baptist, I shouldn't say yes, but I do agree with you that it's become a shortcut in Hollywood. Business Insider spoke to a few successful creators, and, nobody's making $140,000 to $5 million a year after deciding to choose this route. A Sopranos star revealed she earned enough money on OnlyFans to save her home from foreclosure in just 5 minutes. OnlyFans takes a 20% cut of the earnings made by the creators, with the remaining 80% going to the creator themselves. So that gives you an idea of really how significant her bank account was, knowing that OnlyFans was also taking a 20% cut. But yes, I mean, it really has become the norm here. You see Charlie Sheen's ex-wife and daughter on the platform because it generates an incredible income. And, I do think that she had a lot of potential to transition that success into mainstream. And unfortunately, she squandered it with this relationship.
Yeah, again, off the tracks. I see it as a tragedy. I don't want to judge her for what she's doing. She's working for herself, making money. But does the money, what are the dangers of young people and the young woman making lots of money this way? Dr. Janie Lacey, are there some sort of pitfalls? Are there things that you have to prepare for that maybe you're not prepared for, that being that young?
Well, there's a lot of pitfalls, Vinny. One of the main pitfalls we'll see is just the power dynamics, right? So when they have resources and they're having what seems to be endless wealth and being able to get what they want, there's a sense of losing a sense of groundedness. So when they're walking with all this money, there's entitlement that we'll see, there's buying of friends, right? So there's this contrast, especially if that was not there before. But the main thing we'll see is a power dynamic that will happen in their life, and that can lead to a lot of destruction if they're not grounded, if they do not have a sense of responsibility and these types of things and discipline. So when we don't see these things, then we'll see in other areas that things can be out of control in that sense.
Yeah, and it's amazing, Kinsey, as Dr. Jane Lacey is describing someone out of control, we see what's happening in the elevator there. I mean, completely unhinged at this point. And this is, you know, months beforehand. And it seemed in the relationship, she's the one who made the money, right?
Oh, yes. I mean, you said it before, but it still is appalling to me that she was paying $10,000 a month for rent and he wasn't contributing. And that clearly was an issue for her because she wouldn't have mentioned it to the cops had it not been. Like, she wanted it known. I'm the breadwinner here. And when you look at some of the chaos, I hesitate to bring it up, but even Christian's family has said through their civil suit that there were drugs involved. And, you know, with a lot of money comes access to things like that. And I do think that might have had a little bit to do with what the toxicity of this relationship.
Yeah, I think it had a lot to do with it. All right, Kinsey and Dr. Jane Lacey staying with us. Still to come, we know police showed up the day of the stabbing, but how many interactions did they have with police before? I'm Vinnie Politan. We continue our investigation of the OnlyFans murder trial. A young, good-looking couple is having sex on the internet for big money, but there were big problems at home. And now he is dead, and she's charged with murder. Here's the story. Courtney Clenney and her boyfriend, Christian Obumseli, were living a fast life. Money, fame, sex, and drugs. Courtney was making tons of money taking off her clothes and performing sexual activity on a subscription website called OnlyFans. Sometimes Christian would get in the act as well. They were living in the trendiest, most expensive section of Miami. But things were not going so well behind the scenes. Jealousy, arguments, and domestic violence fueled a toxic relationship that ended when Courtney put a knife into Christian's chest. She's claiming self-defense, but prosecutors say it is murder. So this relationship, big problems. You know, I've made the analogy a bunch of times between Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, their relationship so toxic. And we saw that at the trial. This one just as toxic, if not more, but with one big difference. At the end of the day, one person is dead and the other is charged with murder. So this takes it all the way to the extreme. So it doesn't just happen overnight. Things happen. You're living in a beautiful building. You have neighbors and you make noise. Neighbors call the police. I want you to take a look at this because this happened the day before, okay? The day before she stabs him. Take a listen to what she is saying to police.
All right, so what do you want to say?
I want to be like, I want to be like exonerated, I guess, of like anything wrong. And I want him, okay, the police are here. I want a restraining order against Christian Obumseli.
And that's going to be a big part of her trial, right? I mean, that little clip where she's the one looking for a restraining order, she wants him away. And he won't go away. Self-defense is the defense. So that's a key little moment in this case, perhaps a big moment in this case. However, what I want to focus in on, this is the day beforehand. Like the day before he stabbed and killed, police are there. And that brings me to the next question in our investigation. How How many interactions did they have with police before Christian's death? How many times? I don't know if we can add them all up, but we're going to try. Joining me, entertainment reporter who's followed this case, host of Kinsey's LA Diaries on Talk TV, Kinsey Schofield, and psychotherapist, CEO of Life Counseling Solutions, Dr. Janie Lacey. All right, I want to begin. I want to show you something first. We're going to have one of these interactions with police, July 27th, 2021, this time in Las Vegas.
More of the story, like I was on the couch, like she threw the glass thing and went out on my face. Then I went back to bed. Like I was like, why'd you do that? Okay. I'm gonna go to bed. I understand that she was mad, you know. Right, but I wasn't doing anything. I was on the couch. Like,
what triggered her to throw in the glass at you?
I think she said she was going downstairs and I think it's my tone. Like, she tells me to work on a couple things, like my tone, facial expressions. So I think it was like my tone. I was like, yeah, cool, go downstairs then. You know, obviously I didn't say it like that, but it could have been like a, she knows how to describe tone. I don't know. I never realized my tone, but I know that she said she wanted to go downstairs. I was like, go downstairs then. A bottle thrown in my head.
Because my feelings were being hurt. Obviously, we're going back and forth. He was already upset with me. I was getting upset with him. We were getting loud. And I was like, oh my God, we're gonna like do damage to the room or something. Not damage to each other. Like, I really want to like.
But why would you think that? Why would you think that you were gonna do damage to the room?
I like throwing something, or like.
Did you throw something?
Did I?
Yeah.
No.
Did anybody throw anything?
No.
So why would you think that there is damage to the room to be made?
Because I've done that before in our house, and I.
What have you done?
Thrown a glass at him, plate, and I could just see, like, the way that things were going. We were either gonna get loud, or I was gonna end up throwing something, or like get in trouble somehow. So I was like, you know what? I'm just nipping this in the bud.
Did you throw a glass or a plate at him today?
No.
Okay. So
no, this was before.
Okay. So when I go to the room and I see a broken glass on the floor, where did the glass come from?
I don't know. I literally couldn't even remember how the fight started.
Okay, well.
Was there?
Yeah.
Maybe I did.
Kinsey, this is a vacation to Vegas. They're on vacation, staying at a very nice hotel, and it sounds like they're trashing the room. This seems to be like a normal part of their life, that they get together, things happen, and police show up.
Yeah, and according to the New York Post, there's body cam video that shows an officer asking Christian, has she ever tried to kill you? And he answers no. But the fact that that officer instinctually, felt the need to ask him that question. And then once Christian sees that she's going to be arrested, he's in tears over it. You know, these are two people that are never really considering the consequences of their actions. But you're right. I mean, this is one of how many incidents these two, in the short time they were together, had with law enforcement. I think it's at least a dozen.
And Dr. Janie Lacey, I remember speaking with one of their neighbors, not from Miami, but when they lived in Texas. And he remembers clothes just being tossed out of the window because they lived above him. And he talked about all the noise and the arguments all the time, everything. I want to give you a little flavor, because there's actually too many to go through in this program. But January 6, 2022, Christian Courtney move into the beautiful apartment building. The front desk is notified of a domestic dispute. Police respond later the same day. January 10th, 4 days later, Front desk notified of 2 domestic disputes. Police respond both times. February 3rd, noise complaint from the neighbors. Security responds, doesn't make contact with Courtney. February 21st, they must have gone on vacation for a week. February 21st, front desk notified about a disturbance in the elevator. I think we've seen that, but they do not make contact with Courtney. February 22nd, a noise complaint. Security responds to the unit. This is just an ongoing situation. How do you not like have a moment where you're like, wait a minute, there's something wrong going on here. Why are we always, being questioned by police? Like, why does that not click in?
Well, what that would tell me is that they normalize their bad behavior. So especially when police officers and third parties are getting involved, so there could be some assumptions made that in their toxic dynamic, whether there was fueled by alcohol or drugs, that there was a lot of consistent emotional deregulation where they would escalate things and probably have a lot of lack of communication and all the different types of things that can elevate these situations and not having boundaries with each other. So when people are getting into these situations where there's constant domestic disturbance calls and there's a pattern there, it's in that pattern that we can see the problem, that they're probably used to not having boundaries with each other, escalation, and probably fueled potentially by drugs and alcohol. And when they have those limits that are not necessarily being recognized, then they'll kind of have this competitiveness, which is also the hallmark of toxic relationships. So they're competing with each other, getting louder, and who can outscream each other, and then it just continues to escalate. And it probably happens so fast in these moments where they get deregulated that they're not necessarily thinking with the right parts of their brain. They just enter these dynamics, which they also get a dopamine rush off of when they're engaging in these levels of connection with each other.
Kinsey, the neighbors were really upset with them, especially when they moved down to Miami. This is a very exclusive building. People are paying a lot of money to live there. They had a small apartment for $10,000 a month. I can't imagine the prices on some of the larger ones. But it seems like there were constant noise complaints and disturbances just from this fighting that was continuing day in and day out. I think at one point there's a threat that they were going to be evicted.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Christian's family says the person who owned the unit where they lived went as far as to beginning the eviction process. That happened in March, per the building management's request, after it had received, like you said, a flood of complaints from other residents. And now, according to this ongoing civil suit that Christian's family has started, management and her landlord reversed course after Courtney told them on March 28th that she had been recently diagnosed with a severe borderline personality disorder and had begun taking medication. But as you know, as you and I both know, the complaints continued after March 28th.
Absolutely. All right, we've got a lot more to get to here because we're talking about all these interactions with police, and it's obvious when these two are together, there are problems. Up next, why was this relationship so toxic?
Like, I was sober for 2 weeks. 2 weeks. And now why am I not sober? Because of you.
The crazy thing about all of this is that yesterday, when you stabbed me in the leg and you saw how bad it was hurting me and I couldn't walk, I couldn't do and you were telling me I wished I could have taken your pain away. Did I make you feel like for stabbing me? No, I just sucked it up and hoped tomorrow will be better.
I'm sorry. I don't care. Find it, Jordan. Okay, just stop. Don't.
A lot of problems. A lot of problems going on between Courtney Clenney and Christian Obumseli. But they stayed together. They stayed together. They would always come back together. But as you heard there, you've got an instance where this wasn't the first time that she stabbed him. She stabbed him another time, thrown glasses at his head. They're in Vegas. He gets knocked out and locked out of the room, begging for her to just open the door so he could go back inside. I mean, these things happened when they were on the road. These things happened in front of other people. And obviously, these things happened at the home down in Miami. Brings us to the next question in our investigation. And it's about these two. Why was this relationship so toxic? Still with us, Kenzie Schofield and Dr. Janie Lacey. I jotted down a few notes here about some of the things that are going on here, and I want to take them maybe one at a time here. But at the top of my list, I have jealousy. Jealousy in this relationship. Kenzie, it seemed like this fueled a lot of the fights, is that she has this jealous streak in her and is constantly accusing him of, you know, talking to other girls, talking to other young women. I don't know if he was or wasn't, but at the end of the day, I mean, that was a big part of their fights.
Yeah, I mean, this huge blow up over just saying hi to somebody as you pass them on a bicycle. That one was wild. And how much of it was projection from, I'd love to know Dr. Lacey's thoughts on this, but from a human standpoint, how difficult was it for him to see the millions of people proposing to her online and leaving, you know, ooey gooey comments for her on the internet, because she was this sexualized character on the internet? That must have been very hard for him to process as well. But the evidence we see was that it was really her that had the issue with jealousy, and man, it's hard to process when you watch some of these fights, just how fired up she is over the thought of him speaking to other women.
Yeah, Dr. Janie Lacey, I think Kenzie makes a great point about the jealousy potentially going in both directions. She gets angry all the time, but like, she makes a living talking to and performing for other men. So what kind of strain does that put on a relationship, and how much does jealousy play in the nature of this relationship?
Well, Vinnie, we know just because someone may be physically beautiful or successful, it does not mean that they're not insecure. So when there's deep insecurity in the relationship, there is projection, because then what happens is then you try to control the other person, and you may be accusing them of the very thing that perhaps is inside of you. So it would be very difficult, but we also know that he accepted this and he participated in this, but he also was trying to please her. So when you look at these toxic dynamics and you look at someone that may be highly volatile and someone that may potentially be more of the people pleaser, they'll push down and they'll suppress their own conflict and their own feelings, what's happening in the relationship, to try to get the validation and to try to get the other person to see their worth. So when you have these types of dynamics, there is a lot of projection that happens, especially when someone is extremely insecure internally, and then they're going to be trying to, there's never going to be enough. There's going to be that control. There's going to have conflict with the other person. But then it's this classic, what we're seeing in their relationship is this crisis reconciliation cycle, the highs and the lows, and it keeps that pattern fueled in their relationship. And that would mean that they both play some level of a part in that cycle. But we can see also there's probably one person that's more of in control, and that's usually the person that has more power in the relationship.
And that was another one of my lines, that the power dynamic between these two, and it seems like she's the one that had the power. Kenzie, you mentioned it, and I think drugs were a part of their life. I mean, I've seen some of the text messages talking about them in Vegas, you know, doing what they were doing. But the other part of that equation is potential mental health issues that she had as well, Kenzie.
Yeah, and you absolutely are not supposed to mix that type of medicine with alcohol or drugs. That was one of my first, thoughts when I read that she could potentially be dealing with mental health issues and visibly seeing them messed up. You're not supposed to mix those. But also, I think even if you're not on any sort of prescription medication, adding alcohol and drugs to the mix can be such a catastrophic event. So you're right. This is what a terrible combination for these two beautiful people that had the world by the tail. They didn't need this. They didn't need to add this stuff. I'm not a drinker, but I just don't understand why they had to add this in the mix.
Dr. Janie Lacey, let's talk about, all right, so we've got a baseline of jealousy in this relationship, and now you've got jealousy, and you layer that with some potential drug and alcohol use, potential abuse, and then let's add another layer of mental health. What does that do, that combination?
Well, what that does is what we see, and those are those psychological factors where there's this addiction to the intensity and the drama, right? When someone truly feels empty inside and they're constantly medicating, and then they're fueling these types of trauma bond and, you know, what we would call intermittent reinforcement, you add all of those factors, it's exactly what we see. There's no normative way of relating to each other. It's either high or low, and then they're constantly under these intensity, right? They can mistake intimacy for intensity, and there's an intensity that then becomes this baseline, and when they're not in that intense state, they're going to create it because that's how they're used to relating and having those cycles in their relationship. And then the baseline of that trauma bond, right? You're trying to get the other person to see your worth and to love you, but it's also the very person who's hurting you, and they create those bonds when there's an intermittent reinforcement. At times they can be validating to each other, and at other times they can be harmful to each other, and they're constantly waiting for them to get back to that validation stage while there's so much hurt going on in that dynamic. So a lot of psychological factors where we're taking consideration the mental health issues and the substance abuse issues. It only intensifies these types of situations and potentially resulting in exactly with what we're seeing.
And kids, the other thing, if you look at what they were doing, it seemed like he was a crypto guy working online. Neither one of them went to an office or went to work. So I think that's another part of the equation, is that they're spending a lot of time together alone.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to me, there's no doubt there was emotional abuse there as well, and I feel like that can chip away at a person's self-worth, making them believe they can't survive on their own when it comes to perhaps Christian's situation. Maybe they thought the other would change, especially if at one point they showed remorse or promised to improve. But sitting around working maybe 3 to 5 hours a day, and then sitting around and only having to play in a city like Miami, that is a toxic situation to be in.
Absolutely. Big thank you, Kinsey Schofield and Dr. Janie Lacey. Always great to have your insight. We appreciate it. You know, being an OnlyFans model is pretty common these days. You heard Kinsey talk about that. There are many young women making lots of money working for themselves. It's very legal. The problem is when you are so young, making so much money and living a dangerous lifestyle, it can all disappear very fast. But here, Christian's life didn't disappear. It was taken. And now a jury will tell us if it was justified. I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.